"Get out, Monica. You had nothing before me." The cameras flashed as Ethan smiled for reporters, pretending the ticket in his pocket was his. Neighbors whispered, calling her crazy, jealous, broke. But only Monica knew the truth. The winning numbers were hers. She just didn't know yet that losing everything that day would be the beginning of something far bigger than revenge. Before we go any further, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Now, let's begin. They said the kitchen smelled like burnt toast, but what Monica noticed was the silence, the kind that pinched the air. Her lottery ticket sat where she left it last night near the fruit bowl, edges curled like it had slept badly. Ethan had laughed then. "Cute dream," he said. "Kiss on the forehead, phone face down." By morning, he and the ticket were both gone. Monica opened cabinets as if the truth might be hiding behind the sugar. The coffee hissed. The window laid a ribbon of light across the counter. A neighbor's radio mumbled about a winner in the city. At noon, a clip hit every feed. Ethan on a press line, barber fresh, clutching a giant check for $100 million. His smile said destiny. His caption said mine. The camera caught his watch, his wink, the lie. In the background, a woman with a clipboard whispered, "Is his wife here?" Someone shook her head. Monica sat in her car and let the AC roar until her eyes dried. She replayed last night, how she picked numbers at the corner store because the cashier said the machine ran hot on Wednesdays. How she teased Ethan and tucked the slip beneath the bowl like a small prayer. When she pulled up to the house, the driveway glittered with tripods. Ethan stood on the steps, practicing charm. The publicist fixed his collar. A neighbor hovered by the hedge. She stepped forward. "Please, we need to talk." He looked at her the way people look at a closed road. Men in polos shifted. Phones rose. "That ticket was mine," she said. "I bought it. The receipt is in my purse." He smiled for the lenses. "Monica," he said, "let it go. You always wanted too much." He lifted her suitcase with 2 fingers and set it on the grass. Reporters caught the thud. The neighbor whispered. She kept to herself, but maybe she drove him crazy. Another voice snipped. "Men change when money shows up." Heat pressed against Monica's skin. The hibiscus smelled thick. She reached for the suitcase handle, hands shaking. Ethan leaned close so the mics could not sip. "You had nothing before me. You will be fine after me." It should have split her. Instead, something inside went still. Her jaw unclenched. She turned, the suitcase wheels ticking over the walk. Behind her, the house erupted. Cheers for the man who reinvented luck. She kept moving. At the corner, the bakery sign across the street flickered. She paused to smell butter drifting from its door. Then she kept going, one breath at a time, while the feeds crowned a king, stacking his throne on sand. By sunset, the clips were everywhere. Ethan spraying champagne on a yacht. Ethan tossing chips under casino lights. Ethan laughing into a drone, while the caption shouted, "New money, who this?" "Queen fumbled the bag," one wrote. "She looked controlling anyway," another added. Monica muted the sound, but could not mute the glare. The apartment she found smelled of paint and dust. She set her suitcase down and lifted her phone. Her feed pulsed. An aunt sent a prayer. A friend sent a link, and the question, "You good?" She typed back soon, deleted it, then sent fine. 2 lawyers called before midnight. One promised revenge. One said contingency and smiled with his voice. They named big numbers like throwing glitter. She listened, pinched the bridge of her nose, and pictured courtrooms with cameras. "Tell me the truth," the first said. "We can win this." She thanked them and asked for time. Around 2, she opened a bakery box she had saved and inhaled the sweet air inside cardboard. Butter and vanilla were calmer than any, quote. She stacked recipe cards on the counter, smoothed a corner, then stood still. Maybe walking away was not weakness. Maybe it was the only way to keep something human inside her from burning out. Morning brought another headline. Ethan bought a house in the hills. The driveway swallowed an army of cars. A neighbor from their old street posted a thread about how Monica never waved. The thread went viral. People liked the story of a villain they did not know. Monica took a bus to the part of town where steam lived in the vents and bread lived behind glass. The bakery owner, a woman with flour on her sleeve, nodded. "You look like you need a kitchen," she said. "I rent nights for cheap." Monica said yes before fear could dress. She learned the keys by touch. She learned the oven by its breath. She whisked until her wrists ached and rolled dough until her shoulders burned. She set timers and listened to the city's engine. When the lawyers called again, she met them at a diner with sticky menus. They laid out paths like highways, restraining order, emergency petition, media push. She stirred coffee. "If I give him my time," she said, "he keeps me. I want out." The older lawyer tilted his head. "Peace costs you money," he said. She nodded. "Money returns. Peace, maybe not." She walked home with a bag of eggs and a packet of yeast warm in her pocket. Kids chased each other around a hydrant, and someone's radio told an old love song. Her phone buzzed. Ethan's voice arrived like it had traveled through tin. "Sign an NDA," he said. "Take a settlement. Be reasonable." She listened to his breathing and felt the quiet rise inside her like a tide. "No," she said. "Keep your noise." She hung up and slid the phone face down on the counter. That night the dough rose steady. She pressed 2 fingers into its skin and watched it spring back. For a second she forgot the feeds and the man on the steps. For a second there was only heat and patience and a room she could claim. The first morning she opened her own stall. The sign barely clung to the window. "Sweet Dawn Pastries" was painted by hand, uneven letters, but honest ones. The street still smelled like car exhaust and yesterday's rain. She placed 6 trays of cinnamon rolls in the display and waited. No one came. By 10, an old man with newspaper fingers stepped in. He bought one, bit it, and closed his eyes. "Tastes like somebody remembered what mornings are for," he said. Word moved the way good scent does, through alleys, across bus stops, into lunch breaks. Within weeks, the stall turned into a heartbeat of the block. Students leaned on counters, scrolling through phones, laughing with powdered sugar on their shirts. She kept her prices low, smiled until her cheeks hurt, and learned to forget Ethan's name each time she rang the register. Still, some nights memory slipped through the cracks. She'd see him in a headline, grinning beside a new luxury car, captioned "King of Luck." Or she'd overhear barbershop debates about his mansion parties and the mystery wife who tried to steal his shine. She never corrected them. People believed the loudest version of any story. But inside her kitchen, truth had a different sound: the slap of dough, the low hiss of coffee, the creak of a stool where a child waited for a free cookie. Monica learned rhythm again, in the rise and fall of heat. Months became years. The stall turned into a shop. The shop became 3. She hired single moms and students who needed cash before rent. She never raised her voice. "Let them taste comfort," she'd say. "The world already gives us bitterness for free." When a reporter showed up one afternoon asking for the woman who lost the lottery, Monica laughed. "I didn't lose it," she said, wiping flour from her wrist. "It just took a different route." The feature aired quietly on a weekend. But people saw something they didn't expect: grace instead of gossip. Orders doubled overnight. 3 years later, she stood in her newest branch, surrounded by pastel walls and the hum of espresso machines. Her employees surprised her with balloons and a cake that read, "To the woman who baked her way out of heartbreak." She laughed until her stomach hurt. Outside, rain streaked the windows, turning the city lights into watercolor. She watched people hurry past each one, carrying their own secret ticket, their own shot at beginning again. Somewhere deep down, she knew the world hadn't finished its circle yet. There was one story, still walking around, broke and loud, waiting to collide with hers again. It happened on a Thursday that smelled like wet asphalt and roasted coffee. Monica had just left a meeting about expanding her franchise when she saw the figure slumped against the lamppost near the intersection. His coat was torn, hair matted, a paper cup trembling in his hand. For a moment she almost walked past. Then he lifted his head, and time cracked open. Ethan, the man who once strutted through cameras, now looked hollowed out, the shine stripped from his skin. His eyes flickered like bad bulbs. For a breath, he didn't recognize her, maybe because peace changes a face more than age ever could. She froze on the sidewalk. Cars hissed by, neon lights blinking across puddles. People flowed around her like water, but all she could hear was the soft clink of coins in his cup. She took a step closer. "Ethan?" Her voice came out steady, not bitter, not sweet, just a question hanging between 2 lifetimes. He blinked up at her. "Monica?" His tone was disbelief, wrapped in shame. How?" She knelt a little, careful not to let her bag touch the wet ground. "What happened?" He tried to laugh, but it cracked into a cough. Lost it all. Bad bets. Bad friends. Turns out money doesn't like me as much as I liked it. His eyes darted away. I thought I was unstoppable. The smell of cheap whiskey drifted off him, mixing with the rain. She remembered the designer cologne, the yacht photos, the headlines that called him lucky. Now, luck had walked off and left only this shell. People nearby whispered. Phones tilted slightly. Someone muttered, "Isn't that the lottery guy?" Another said, "That woman looks familiar." Gossip spread fast, the way it always had. Monica opened her purse and pulled out a small brown envelope she used for tips. Inside, a few $100s, enough for food, not pride. She held it out. He looked at it, then at her. "You don't owe me anything." "I know," she said quietly. "That's why it means something." He hesitated, eyes wet now. "Not from rain. You could have ruined me. Everyone wanted to sue, drag me through court, expose me. Why didn't you?" Monica's breath left as a small smile. "Because I realized something. You were never the prize. Peace was." He lowered his gaze, words folding inside him. The streetlight buzzed overhead, flickering against the puddle where his reflection shivered beside hers. She stood, brushed water from her coat, and stepped back. "Take care of yourself, Ethan." He looked up one last time. "You still bake?" "Every day." Then she turned and walked away, heels tapping softly through the rain. Behind her, the murmurs swelled the crowd, piecing together the irony, the fall, the quiet mercy of the woman he once discarded. As she disappeared into the blur of headlights, Ethan clutched the envelope to his chest, the same way he once held that winning ticket. Only this time, it felt heavier because, for the first time in years, it wasn't money he wanted to keep. It was forgiveness. The next morning, sunlight poured through the bakery windows like a quiet applause. The city had already moved on, the rain rinsed clean. Monica unlocked the door, set her purse down, and tied her apron the way she always did, tight enough to remind herself she'd earned every inch of peace. Her staff filtered in laughing, unaware that she'd just closed the last chapter of a life that once tried to bury her. The smell of fresh croissants rose into the air, sweet and calm. A customer at the counter whispered to another, "That's her, the woman with the lottery story." The second one shook their head. "No way. She doesn't look bitter enough." Monica smiled at that. Bitterness, she thought, was for people who still waited for apologies. She took a tray from the oven, the heat brushing her face, and glanced out through the glass front. Across the street, a man sat under a bus stop shelter, clutching coffee from her shop. His hands were shaky, but his eyes stayed on the steam, as if watching something he'd lost but could finally understand. She didn't wave. She didn't need to. Life had already delivered its verdict. Greed collapses. Grace rebuilds. Later that evening, as she closed up, she wrote a note on the chalkboard by the door. "Peace is the sweetest thing we bake here." She drew a small heart beneath it and turned off the lights. Walking home, the air smelled of rain again, different this time. Cleaner, the kind that promises morning. Somewhere behind her, the man who once stole her fortune sat alone, realizing he had given away everything that ever mattered. And somewhere ahead of her, Monica Brooks walked into the glow of the next day, carrying nothing but the warmth of her own making. Sometimes, the greatest revenge is no revenge at all, just peace, growth, and grace. If Monica's journey moved you, hit subscribe for more powerful stories of justice, healing, and transformation that prove karma always remembers the address.
In the dimly lit courtroom of a small southern town, where the air hung heavy with the weight of unspoken prejudices, a black woman named Elena sat rigidly on the wooden bench, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her husband, Marcus, a white man she'd loved for over a decade, stood across the room, his arm casually draped around the shoulder of his young mistress, a blonde woman named Brittany, whose smug smile cut through the tension like a knife. The judge's gavel echoed as the divorce papers were presented, and Marcus signed them with a flourish, his mistress whispering something that made him chuckle softly. But as the proceedings unfolded, a shadow of doubt flickered in Marcus's eyes. Little did he know. The judge, an unassuming figure with a keen sense of justice, held secrets that would unravel their carefully woven web of deceit and expose the ugly underbelly of racism that had poisoned their marriage. What started as a simple divorce would soon erupt into a reckoning, where hidden biases and calculated betrayals came crashing down, leaving the guilty to face the bitter taste of regret. As Elena's composed facade masked a storm of hurt, the room pulsed with anticipation. For this was no ordinary separation. It was a battle against the insidious forces of discrimination that had quietly eroded her life. The audience in the gallery shifted uneasily, sensing the brewing storm, while outside, the world continued oblivious to the drama that would soon highlight how deeply entrenched prejudices could twist even the most personal bonds. Would justice prevail, or would the scales tip in favor of privilege once more? The clock ticked forward, drawing everyone closer to the moment when regret would claim its victims. Elena's story began in the vibrant streets of Atlanta, where she had grown up in a close-knit Black community, dreaming of a life beyond the barriers that society often imposed. She was a talented graphic designer, her work infused with the rich cultural motifs of her heritage, earning her a modest but fulfilling career. It was at a local art gallery opening that she met Marcus, a charismatic real estate developer from a wealthy white family. Their connection was instant, a whirlwind romance that seemed to defy the subtle divides of race in a post-civil rights era. They married quickly, blending their worlds in a ceremony that promised equality and love. For years, their life together appeared picture-perfect, a cozy home in the suburbs, shared vacations, and mutual support in their ambitions. But beneath the surface, cracks formed slowly. Fed by Marcus's unspoken resentments and the influence of his conservative family, who never fully accepted Elena's presence at holiday gatherings, their polite smiles hiding disdainful whispers about cultural differences. As time passed, Marcus's career soared, landing him lucrative deals that elevated their lifestyle. Yet, with success came distance. He began spending late nights at the office, claiming work demands, while Elena juggled her freelance projects and the emotional labor of maintaining their home. Unbeknownst to her, Marcus had started an affair with Brittany, his secretary, a woman who fit seamlessly into the elite circles he now frequented, her fair skin and familial connections opening doors that Elena's background seemed to close. Brittany encouraged Marcus's growing prejudices, subtly reinforcing stereotypes about Black women being too strong-willed or not fitting in, planting seeds of doubt that blossomed into full-blown resentment. Marcus, eager to climb higher, saw divorcing Elena as a way to shed what he privately called his baggage, allowing him to fully embrace a life unencumbered by the racial tensions he claimed exhausted him. The decision to divorce came abruptly, served to Elena via cold legal papers that cited irreconcilable differences. Devastated but resolute, she hired a sharp attorney, determined to fight for her share of their assets, including the house they'd built together and the savings from her contributions. Marcus, emboldened by Brittany's presence, pushed for a quick settlement, underestimating Elena's strength and the hidden evidence she had gathered. As the court date approached, the town buzzed with rumors, many dismissing Elena's plight as just another failed interracial marriage, ignoring the deeper currents of bias that had led them here. Curiosity built as whispers spread about Marcus parading his mistress openly, a bold move that reeked of entitlement. Little did anyone know the judge assigned to the case, Honorable Judith Harlan, a veteran of civil rights battles, had her own history with such injustices, setting the stage for a confrontation that would peel back layers of hidden racism. As the divorce hearing commenced, the courtroom filled with a mix of spectators, friends, family, and curious locals drawn by the scandal. Elena entered with quiet dignity, her dark curls tied back, wearing a simple yet elegant suit that spoke to her resilience. Across the aisle, Marcus and Brittany sat close, their body language screaming defiance. Brittany's hand rested possessively on his knee, a silent declaration of victory. The proceedings started routinely, with attorneys outlining assets, the marital home valued at $500,000, joint bank accounts swollen from Marcus's deals, and Elena's design business, which she had nurtured independently but intertwined with his networks. Tension mounted as Marcus's lawyer painted Elena as the instigator of their troubles, subtly invoking racial tropes, claiming she was overly demanding and culturally mismatched, words that echoed the prejudices Marcus had internalized. Elena's attorney countered, presenting evidence of her financial contributions, but the real undercurrent was the racism simmering beneath. Emails surfaced, leaked from Marcus's work account where he joked with colleagues about upgrading from his urban wife to someone more polished, code for white and privileged. Brittany's social media posts, subpoenaed quietly, revealed derogatory comments about black women, liking memes that perpetuated stereotypes of them as aggressive or unworthy of high society. These revelations built slowly, each one chipping away at Marcus's facade of innocence. As days dragged on, the hearing extended due to contested assets, the emotional stakes escalated. Elena endured cross-examinations that probed her background, questions laced with implicit bias, like why she chose an interracial marriage in a traditional town. She felt the weight of historical injustices, reminiscent of stories her grandmother told about segregation, where black women were often sidelined in matters of family and finance. Marcus grew irritable, his confidence waning as witnesses testified to his changing behavior, former friends recalling overheard slurs at parties, where he dismissed Elena's achievements as affirmative action luck. Brittany, once poised, fidgeted nervously, her role shifting from supporter to liability, when evidence emerged of her encouraging the affair, with promises of a better fit in his social circle. The rising injustice peaked as financial discrepancies came to light. Marcus had hidden assets in offshore accounts, funneled through Brittany's family connections, intending to leave Elena with scraps. This wasn't just infidelity. It was a calculated erasure, rooted in his belief that Elena, as a black woman, didn't deserve equality in their dissolution. The courtroom air thickened with outrage from the gallery, where black community members murmured about systemic biases in family courts, where women of color often received lesser settlements. Elena's poise cracked slightly in private moments, tears shed in the restroom as she grappled with the betrayal, not just of love, but of the promise of a colorblind union. Yet, she pressed on, her curiosity about Marcus's full motives fueling her resolve. Judge Harlan observed silently, her notes meticulous, drawing parallels to cases she'd seen in her youth during the civil rights movement, where racial prejudice disguised as personal conflict robbed minorities of justice. The tension built to a fever pitch when a surprise witness, Marcus's former business partner, a black man he'd sidelined, testified to overhearing racist rants that influenced their professional split. This revelation connected the dots. Marcus's affair wasn't mere lust. It was an escape from the burden of interracial life, amplified by societal pressures that valued whiteness. As the rising action crested, the room hummed with anticipation. The emotional stakes at their highest, injustice laid bare for all to see. Elena's heart raced, wondering if the system would finally tilt in her favor, or if privilege would prevail once more. The courtroom reached its boiling point on the final day, the air electric with unresolved fury. Judge Harlan, her expression stern yet compassionate, called for closing arguments. Marcus's side pleaded for a swift end, emphasizing mutual faults, but Elena's attorney unleashed a barrage of damning evidence. Recorded voicemails where Marcus belittled Elena's race, calling her success handouts, and documents showing he'd transferred funds to Brittany premeditatively, framing it as protecting his legacy from what he termed a mismatched union. As the judge deliberated briefly, silence enveloped the room, broken only by Brittany's anxious tapping. Then Harlan spoke, her voice cutting through the haze. She ruled not just on the divorce, but exposed the racism at its core, citing precedents from landmark civil rights cases where discrimination in marital dissolutions was deemed unlawful. Marcus's hidden assets were ordered frozen, with Elena awarded full ownership of the home and 70% of their savings, far beyond standard splits, to compensate for the emotional and financial toll of the prejudice she'd endured. But the true intensity came when Harlan addressed Marcus and Brittany directly, highlighting how their actions perpetuated systemic racism. Brittany's complicity in encouraging the split based on racial superiority and Marcus's betrayal as a microcosm of broader societal failures. Marcus's face drained of color, his arm slipping from Brittany's as regret dawned in his eyes, the realization that his entitlement had backfired spectacularly. Brittany, tears streaming, clutched her bag, her smugness shattered as the judge imposed additional penalties: community service in racial sensitivity programs and a public apology in the local paper. The gallery erupted in murmurs, some cheering quietly as Elena stood tall, the weight lifting from her shoulders. This was the dramatic peak, where injustice met its match, the judges ruling a hammer blow against hidden biases, leaving the guilty reeling in the ruins of their own making. In the aftermath, Elena emerged from the courthouse into the sunlight, a sense of liberation washing over her like a long-awaited rain. The ruling not only secured her financial future, but validated the silent struggles she'd faced, the microaggressions, the isolation, the constant proving of her worth in a world that often diminished Black women. She sold the house, using the proceeds to expand her design business, channeling her experiences into art that celebrated Black resilience and called out injustice. Marcus, stripped of his illusions, faced professional fallout. Clients distanced themselves from his tainted reputation, forcing him into a humbler job where he grappled daily with the regret of his choices. Brittany, her affair exposed as shallow, returned to her family in disgrace, her prejudices laid bare for reflection. The case rippled through the community, sparking conversations about interracial marriages and the hidden racism that undermined them. Local news covered the story, framing it as a modern echo of historical fights for equality, inspiring others to speak out against similar biases in their lives. Elena found solace in support groups, connecting with women who'd endured parallel betrayals, turning her pain into advocacy. Though scars remained, she rebuilt with grace, her story a testament to the power of perseverance amid adversity. This tale, inspired by real accounts of discriminatory divorces in American courts, underscores how racism infiltrates even intimate relationships, eroding trust and equity. It reminds us that justice, when wielded wisely, can dismantle prejudice, but only if we confront it head-on. What if more stories like Elena's were heard? Could they finally bridge the divides that persist? Let this be a call to reflect. In your own life, are there biases waiting to be challenged? Share your thoughts below, and remember, true change begins with empathy and accountability.
The sound of porcelain shattering echoed through the marble conference room like a gunshot. Every eye turned toward the young Black woman standing at the door, her voice steady, her Mandarin flawless. "Mr. Chen," she said in perfect Chinese, "please allow me to translate what you just said." The billionaire froze. The vice president choked on his laughter, and the room that had moments earlier mocked her mother fell silent. But just 30 minutes earlier, that same young woman, Letitia Silva, had been invisible. And now, she was about to flip the entire power structure of the Thompson Empire upside down. You're not going to believe how this humiliation turned into a $1 million deal. Keep watching. The morning had started like every other Thursday in Beverly Hills. Sunlight spilled through the glass walls of the Thompson Mansion's boardroom, glinting off gold-plated pens and untouched croissants. William Thompson, a 58-year-old real estate mogul with salt and pepper hair and a perpetual air of self-importance, sat nervously across from his potential investor, Chen Wei, a Chinese billionaire whose calm demeanor hid the power to either save or destroy Thompson Enterprises with a single signature. Beside William, his vice president Ricardo Montero leaned back in his leather chair, smirking as if the entire meeting were just another stage for his arrogance. Everything was supposed to go smoothly until the interpreter canceled. Now, Mr. Chin had been speaking Mandarin for 5 straight minutes, his tone growing more frustrated with each syllable. And no one understood a thing. "Fantastic," Ricardo muttered, pretending to whisper, but loud enough for the entire room to hear. "Millions on the line, and we're playing charades." Carmen Silva, the housemaid, froze mid-step as she poured coffee into his cup. She had worked in that mansion for 7 years, seen more deals, lies, and laughter than any outsider ever should, but she knew her place, Serve, smile, disappear. But today, she couldn't disappear fast enough. Ricardo's gaze shifted to her. "Hey, Carmen," he said with a grin that carried centuries of cruelty. "You've been around here long enough. I bet you picked up a little Chinese washing the dishes, huh?" Laughter rippled through the room. William forced an awkward chuckle. Carmen said nothing. She just lowered her eyes, the same way she'd done her entire life to survive moments like these. But outside that glass door, her daughter Letitia heard every word. She had come early from UCLA, hoping to surprise her mother with lunch. Instead, she found herself listening to her mother being treated like entertainment. Ricardo wasn't done. He turned to William, pretending to think. "Tell you what, boss," he said, snapping his fingers. "Let's make this fun. If Carmen here can translate what our guest just said, I'll give her my job." The executives burst into laughter again. To them, it was just a joke, a cruel, harmless, corporate kind of racism that they could disguise as humor. But to Letitia, that moment lit a fuse that had been burning for years. Flashback, 3 years earlier. Letitia was 18, working overnight shifts at a bakery, saving every cent for college. One morning, she overheard Ricardo's voice echoing from the living room while her mother cleaned. "Some people are just born to serve," he had said, sipping champagne. "You can teach them skills, but you can't buy them ambition." That night, Letitia downloaded a Mandarin language app on her cracked phone. Her goal wasn't to learn a new language. Her goal was revenge through excellence. Every morning before sunrise, she studied phonetics and tones while the city slept. Every night, she whispered Mandarin phrases while wiping sweat off bakery counters. By her second year at UCLA, she could hold full business conversations with native speakers. By her third, she specialized in Chinese-American trade relations. And yet she kept it secret, even from her mother. Because one day she knew an opportunity would come to flip the entire script. Back in the present, Ricardo was still performing for his audience. He stood, laughing. "Actually, let's make it even better," he said, raising his voice so everyone could hear. "If your maid can translate even one sentence, I'll not only give her my job, but I'll pay for her daughter's college, too." The room erupted in hysterics. Carmen smiled faintly. "Mr. Ricardo," she said softly. "Please, let's not do this," Ricardo interrupted, mock bowing. "Come on, Carmen. Say something in Chinese. Anything, impress us," she wanted to cry. But after decades of humiliation, Carmen had mastered the art of swallowing her pain. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't understand." Ricardo laughed so hard his watch nearly slipped off. Even William chuckled nervously, desperate to diffuse the tension. But Chen Wei, the billionaire, did not laugh. His eyes had narrowed. His jaw had tightened. He didn't speak Portuguese, but he didn't need to understand the words. Disrespect translated fluently across every language. He rose from his chair and unleashed a storm of Mandarin, his voice sharp, commanding, full of disgust. He pointed at Ricardo, then at Carmen, and finally gathered his papers. William panicked. "Please, Mr. Chen, wait." But the businessman's message was clear even before the translation. He was done. Outside the door, Letitia's heart pounded. She had understood every word. "A company that humiliates its workers," Chen had said, "is run by small men. My mother was a maid. I will not partner with people who treat women like her as trash." He gave them 5 minutes to prove they had any decency or professionalism left. Otherwise, he'd cancel every contract. 5 minutes. That was all she had. Letitia adjusted her blazer, one she had bought from a thrift store before her first university interview. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. "Excuse me?" she said clearly. Every head turned. Carmen froze, her face draining of color. Ricardo smirked. "Oh, great. The maid's daughter. What are you doing here?" "I'm here," Letitia said, "to fix your mess." Ricardo laughed. "You?" "Sweetheart, this is a business meeting, not a career fair." Letitia ignored him and turned directly to the billionaire. "Mr. Chen," she said in flawless Mandarin, "I deeply apologize for the disrespect you've endured. May I translate for you?" The room went silent. Chen Wei's eyes widened. "You speak Mandarin?" he asked in disbelief. Letitia bowed slightly. "I do, sir. I've studied Chinese language and business negotiation for several years. I'd be honored to assist. Ricardo's laughter died mid-breath. William blinked in disbelief. Carmen pressed her hands together, her heart pounding. "Wait," Ricardo stammered. "You're the maid's kid. You can't just walk in here." "Actually," Letitia cut in, "you made a bet. You said whoever could translate Mr. Chen's words would get your job. Correct?" Ricardo's face turned red. "That was a joke. I recorded it," Letitia said calmly, lifting her phone. "It didn't sound like one," Chen chuckled softly in Mandarin. "She's sharp." And then Letitia began to translate, word for word, everything Chen had said earlier. The insults, the moral outrage, the story of his mother, every syllable precise, powerful, and cutting. When she finished, Chen confirmed, "Every word is correct." Ricardo looked like someone had drained the blood from his face. William leaned forward, struggling to process the situation. You actually speak Mandarin?" "Fluently," Letitia replied. "And I understand Chinese business culture better than some of your senior executives." "Impossible," Ricardo muttered. "This is a setup. Impossible?" Letitia repeated, her tone sharp. "Or inconvenient? For a man who thought education belonged to people who look like you?" The room fell silent again. Chen smiled faintly, clearly impressed. "Miss Silva," he said, switching to English, "you mentioned business culture. Are you familiar with our investment proposal?" Letitia nodded. "I am, Mr. Chen, and I believe there's an error in your financial conversion on page 23. She pulled out a printed copy she had photographed earlier in the hallway and pointed directly at the numbers. Chen's eyes widened as he checked. "You're right. The dollar conversion is off by 0.4%. How did you—" "I pay attention," she said simply. "And I respect details. That's something this company seems to have forgotten." The tension was electric. Ricardo was practically vibrating with fury. "William," he snapped, "you can't seriously be entertaining this circus." But William was staring at Letitia with something new in his eyes, respect mixed with shame. "Ricardo," he said quietly, "maybe you should let her finish." Letitia didn't miss a beat. "Mr. Chen, may I propose a solution?" "Please," Chen said. She held up her phone again, but this time she opened an app she'd built herself. "This," she said, "is a real-time translation and cultural bridge tool I developed for my thesis. It doesn't just translate words, it adapts tone, etiquette, and meaning between Chinese and Western business negotiations." Chen blinked, astonished. "You made this?" "Yes, and it works both ways." She tapped the screen. The app immediately began transcribing Chen's Mandarin and projecting flawless English on the tablet beside William. Within seconds, the impossible was happening. A seamless bilingual conversation between two worlds that minutes ago couldn't even share a sentence. Chen leaned forward. "Miss Silva, I'll buy your app. Exclusive rights. Name your price." Ricardo's jaw dropped. "William, you can't be serious." "Quiet," William snapped for the first time. Letitia smiled. "Exclusive license $500,000, plus a consulting contract, $300,000 annually." Chen didn't hesitate. "Deal." Ricardo slammed his fist on the table. "This is ridiculous. She's just a student." William turned to him, his patience finally gone. "No, Ricardo. She's the only professional in this room." That's when Letitia pulled her final card. She replayed Ricardo's bet from her phone. "If she translates, I'll give her mother my job." The words hung in the air like a curse. William turned slowly. "Ricardo, you did say that," Ricardo stammered. "William, come on, it was a joke." "Not to Mr. Chen," William said coldly. "And not to the woman you humiliated." Chen folded his arms. "In my country, a man's word is his bond. If you break it, you lose face." William nodded grimly. "Ricardo Montero, you're fired. Effective immediately." The color drained from Ricardo's face. "William, please, get out," William said. Ricardo's voice broke. "After all I've done?" "Exactly," William interrupted. "After all you've done?" The vice president stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The sound echoed like justice delivered. Carmen covered her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. Letitia reached out and squeezed her hand. "It's okay, Mom. We're done being invisible." Chen stood and extended his hand to Letitia. "Miss Silva, from now on, you'll be my official liaison with Thompson Enterprises." William nodded. "Agreed. And, Letitia, welcome aboard as our new Vice President of International Relations." The room erupted in applause, except for Carmen, who was too overwhelmed to move. Her daughter, once the maid's kid who wasn't supposed to belong there, now sat at the head of the table. 6 months later, the Los Angeles skyline shimmered outside Letitia's office window. On her desk sat a small framed photo of her mother smiling in a crisp supervisor's uniform. Carmen now managed an entire staff, earning triple her old salary. The translation app had been licensed by 15 multinational companies, generating millions in annual revenue. Letitia's name had become synonymous with innovation, diversity, and quiet rebellion. Her first major project? A free language school for underprivileged youth, because no one should ever be mocked for where they start. At a company press event, she stood before a crowd and said, "Competence has no color, accent, or surname. It speaks every language of success if you let it." And as for Ricardo, he was last seen applying for jobs at smaller firms, rejected repeatedly. Everywhere he went, the story followed him like a shadow. The man who lost his $1 million career to the maid's daughter who spoke Chinese. One afternoon, he showed up at Thompson Enterprises lobby, waiting awkwardly by the reception desk. Letitia stepped out of the elevator and saw him. "Ricardo," she said, her tone calm but firm. "What are you doing here?" He swallowed. "I just wanted to ask for a second chance. Anything. I've learned my lesson." She studied him for a long moment before replying. "Second chances aren't given, Ricardo. They're earned. When you stop seeing people as beneath you, maybe the world will stop keeping you beneath it." He nodded slowly, eyes downcast, and walked out. Letitia turned toward her office, the weight of justice light on her shoulders. Her mother's laughter echoed faintly down the hallway, a sound that once belonged to pain, now transformed into triumph. And that's how a young black woman, once invisible in the halls of privilege, rewrote the rules of power, with nothing but knowledge, dignity, and her mother's strength behind her. If this story moved you, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it, because real power isn't inherited. It's earned. And what happens next in stories like these might just inspire the world.
Mrs. Ada, do you have anything left to say before we finalize this divorce?
She doesn't. She knows it's over. Just sign the papers, Ada.
Don't worry. I'll take good care of him.
You both rehearsed this moment, didn't you?
Yeah, guess we did.
Then I hope you rehearsed how to lose everything, too.
Mrs. Ada, what do you mean?
Because before walking in here, I made sure this divorce would cost him more than he could ever imagine.
Ada sat in the courtroom with her hands folded in her lap, a simple black dress and the same calm face she had worn for months. The room hummed with low voices and the scratch of pens. Across from her, Ethan smiled like a man who already owned the ending. Beside him, Clara laughed soft and sharp, like a woman who believed victory had a perfume. The judge called the room to order. "We are here to finalize the divorce," he said. Ethan's lawyer slid the stack of papers forward. "Sign here, Mr. Collins. Sign here, Mrs. Collins." The pen felt heavy in Ada's fingers for a second, but she set it down, moved her eyes once over the room, and signed where required. The paper fluttered. Ethan leaned back, satisfaction playing on his face. Clara flipped her hair, and a hush fell that felt like an audience waiting for the curtain to drop. Nobody in that room guessed Ada had not come to plead. She had come to finish the chapter in the only language he understood, evidence. As the lawyers began the formalities, Ada opened the slim envelope she had kept on her lap. "Your Honor," she said, voice steady and soft, "there's one document I'd like introduced into the record." A lawyer's look passed between Ethan and his counsel, the sort of look that still thought they controlled the script. The judge raised an eyebrow and gestured for her to proceed. Ada slid the papers across the bench, a copy of a trust, bank statements, screenshots, a small flash drive. The judge read the heading and blinked. The Barrett Family Trust, Marital Protection Clause. 6 months earlier, Ada had not been the fragile woman Ethan and Clara assumed she was. She had been the one who packed lunches, sat up late with spreadsheets, and bankrolled the early months of what Ethan called his vision. She had given up promotions and nights out, thinking their future was a shared project. She discovered first the little betrayals, texts left on his phone, receipts for dinners where she had been told they were out of town for work, a perfume note that didn't belong to her. The humiliation arrived in stages. A whispered joke at a charity event, a public correction of her accent by Clara at a company cocktail hour, the slow, deliberate erasure of her presence from photos and posts. Everyone saw the new couple and assumed she would crumble. That's what made them careless. Ada's anger did not flare. It sharpened. She began to collect. At first, it was small things, screenshots, timestamps, the breadcrumb trail people leave online when they want the world to see them. Then she moved to banking records, transfers to accounts with unfamiliar names, charges for plane tickets, and hotel suites. When Ethan brushed off her questions as insecurity, she recorded conversations with her phone and her purse. When Clara posted a photo with a caption that mocked her without naming her, Ada saved the post and busted the image file metadata. Every slight, every condescending laugh, every "she's not our type" comment was cataloged and filed. Not a reckless campaign of revenge, a study in patience. When Ada found an old family trust from her late father, she read it every night. Fernando Barrett had been a careful man. In a paragraph that looked like a throwaway legalism, he had protected the family home and business in a way that was easy to miss. Marital assets placed in trust, subject to protection clauses in cases of abandonment, fraud, or marital dissolution due to infidelity. It was not a salacious clause. It was a shield. Ada took that shield to Dr. Maya Riaz, a lawyer whose reputation read like a warning for men who lied with confidence. Maya listened, her expression flat, then smiled a small, efficient smile. "We work with the facts," she said. "We make the facts undeniable." They did not rush into court. They moved with patience that looked like weakness. Ada kept a calm face and a quiet voice while Ethan and Clara paraded their victory. At parties, when Clara leaned toward Ethan and said something that implied superiority, Ada nodded and took notes in her phone. When Ethan bragged to a friend about how easy it would be to get everything, Ada photographed his messages. She left small tests in his way, a bank deposit that required approval, a contract that needed signatures, and watched him sign things he believed were routine. And if you're still watching, you already feel it. That silence before the storm, when the one everyone underestimated is about to change everything. So subscribe and like the video. Let's get back to it. On the day their private life went public, Ethan strutted into the courthouse like a man who had already planned his new life. Clara wore a dress that said she believed she belonged in every room they entered. Their lawyer had prepared a consensual settlement, picture, tidy lines, quick signatures, clean break. The judge called the matter routine. Ethan leaned forward and asked to expedite. That's when Dr. Maya Riaz asked for a short pause, a procedural step she had quietly scheduled with the court clerk days earlier. No one in Ethan's camp thought to object. They were busy counting the spoils. When the court called the matter back to session, Dr. Riaz pushed a thin folder forward and stood. "Your Honor," she said, before finalization, "we request the court to review the Barrett Family Trust and the recent transactions relating to the marital estate." Ethan's lawyer sputtered a polite protest. "This is irrelevant to the divorce settlement, Your Honor." The judge turned the folder, and his eyes moved over the trust excerpt. The clause read clearly, "In event of dissolution arising from documented marital infidelity or the misappropriation of marital assets, the trustee shall transfer full beneficial interest of the marital estate to the surviving spouse and freeze accounts pending forensic review." Ethan's mouth moved like a man trying to recall a speech. Clara's smile faltered. Evidence does not need a flourish when it is true. Maya played the audio recordings first. Ethan on a late call, his words lazy and candid, admitting he had diverted funds for vacations and gifts, laughing about the convenience of a mistress who kept things discreet. The courtroom listened to the voice it had always trusted, now sounding small and unmistakable. Then the bank statements, transfers sporting Clara's name, sudden lines of credit pulled without Ada's consent, invoices from luxury stores with shipping addresses that matched the hotel receipts that said Miami, 2 nights. The judge's face moved through a sequence. Surprise, skepticism, professional concern. The gallery gasped in 100 tiny sounds. Ethan's lawyer scrambled for objectivity. The veneer of control cracked. Ada did not shout. She did not crumble. She sat and let the evidence speak, then stood when the judge asked if she had anything to add. Yes, she said simply. My father believed in protecting the family. The trust is clear. I did not come here to destroy a life. I came here to show what has been taken. Her voice was level. The judge, a man who had seen many families fall apart under his gavel, let the weight of the law do the talking. He ruled the divorce non-consensual pending a full forensic audit, ordered the freezing of contested accounts, and announced an investigation into fraudulent transfers. The gavel sounded like the end of a sentence Ethan had fashioned for himself. The humiliation that followed was surgical. Clara's confident expression dissolved into a white, stunned mask as cameras and phones in the gallery raised like small, accusing flags. Ethan staggered as if he had been struck. The arrogance evaporated into fear. He tried to stand, to plead that he had misunderstandings or that the recordings were taken out of context. The judge cut him off. Mr. Collins, he said, with the slow calm of the law that had no tolerance for theatricality, you signed papers here today thinking they would free you. Instead, you've revealed the pattern that triggers a protection clause. The law does not reward those who use secrecy and deception to steal marital assets. Outside the courthouse, the world moved faster than the courtroom. Tweets and short clips spread like a rumor that became a headline. The evidence Ada had kept private was now public, and it was undeniable. Friends who had looked at her with pity began to apologize quietly, their eyes guilty. Business partners who once whispered to Ethan now called to ask questions. His company found auditors eager for leads. His credit lines froze. Clara removed her posts and the photos that had once glittered. The comments that had cheered her now turned to questions and memes that stripped the glamour from her face. Ada did not gloat in the hallways. She walked out under a pale sky like a woman who had been given back her footing. Later that week, she signed a small stack of documents of her own, contracts and bank forms that established a consultancy, a company named Barrett Advisory. She filed paperwork to reassert her stake in the family property and to initiate claims for restitution. It was not instantaneous revenge. It was reconstruction. 6 months after the hearing, Ethan's name disappeared from corporate stationery. Clara moved to another city and found the job offers that had seemed certain evaporating as the story of misused funds and public humiliation followed her. The greatest payback was quieter. Ada began to give talks, first to a handful of women at a community center, then to larger rooms. She spoke about strategy, about how humiliation can be cataloged and converted into leverage, about the kind of patient intelligence that turns a wrong into a career. Her consultancy grew. Soon she sat at tables with clients who once would have ignored her resume. The house that had once been a battlefield became her office and a base for a new team. She did not become brittle. She became intentional. When Ethan bumped into her at a networking event months later, his eyes searched for the old tactics: charm, apology, a plea. Ada smiled in a way that says the past is a closed book. You taught me everything I needed to learn, she said and walked on. The story that people told afterward was not only the one about exposure. It was the one about patience, about the difference between rage and resolution. In comment threads and in small coffee shop conversations, listeners repeated the line that had carried the hearing. He had thought he was signing his freedom. In reality, he had signed the paper that proved how foolish he had been. It was not an ending that destroyed a life for sport. It was a turning, A man who had chosen to put greed and his own image over integrity, and a woman who had built again from the rubble. Ada's final words in the video were not vindictive. People will try to remove you from the story of your life, she said. Sometimes you have to write the next chapter yourself.